Alright, let's go. Number 10. The Bayesian-Drake equation. In the mid-2010s, three researchers at Oxford's Future of Humanity Institute sat down to do something unglamorous. They were not hunting aliens. They wanted to audit an equation that everyone quoted and almost nobody had properly interrogated: Frank Drake's 1961 formula for estimating the number of communicating civilizations in the Milky Way. It was, in their words, overdue for a proper accounting. For 6 decades, the standard practice with the Drake equation had been to plug in single best guess numbers for each term: fraction of stars with planets, fraction of planets that develop life, and so on down the chain. Multiply them together, publish one answer. The mathematics quietly assumed that our ignorance of these terms was a rounding error, not a chasm. Anders Sandberg, Eric Drexler, and Toby Ord tried a different move. Instead of guessed point values, they fed each term its full plausible range from the actual scientific literature, ranges spanning many orders of magnitude, and ran the equation properly through that uncertainty. Their paper, Dissolving the Fermi Paradox, released through the Future of Humanity Institute at the University of Oxford in 2018, produced a probability distribution rather than a single number. Across most of the plausible parameter space, the median expectation was a galaxy dense with civilizations, thousands to millions of communicating cultures statistically expected within our own Milky Way. Every serious rebuttal came apart on inspection. Suggestions that they had inflated the biology terms failed because they used the published range, not optimistic guesses. Suggestions that they had ignored the Great Filter failed because their model does not depend on it. Suggestions that the numbers were just probability, not proof, missed the point entirely. That had been the exact critique of the original equation, and this paper is the answer to it. No competing framework has replaced it. If their central estimate is anywhere close to correct, the sky above you right now is not empty. It is a slow, wet forest of civilizations that have never been closer than an unreachable distance, and whose absence in our data is not evidence of loneliness. It is a physics problem. Why then, in nearly a century of listening, has the mathematics that predicts a crowded galaxy produced a silence we still have no honest explanation for? The math predicts company. Independent methods predict habitable ground. Number 9. NASA's Kepler Occurrence Rate Study. The Kepler Space Telescope was never designed to find life. It was launched in 2009 to answer a smaller, cleaner question: how many stars in the sky quietly host planets the right size and temperature for liquid water? For 9 years it stared at one narrow patch of the Milky Way, counting eclipses that lasted hours. The standard practice by the mid-2010s was to take Kepler's raw catalog, extrapolate crudely, and produce headline numbers that quickly drifted from what the actual detection statistics could support. Skeptics were right to be irritated. Multiplication is not measurement, and everyone knew it. A team led by Steve Bryson at NASA's Ames Research Center decided to rebuild the estimate from the instrument up, properly modeling detection completeness, reliability, stellar noise, and the exact geometry of what Kepler could and could not have seen. Their paper, The Occurrence of Rocky Habitable Zone Planets Around Solar-like Stars from Kepler Data, accepted for publication in the Astronomical Journal in 2020, estimated that roughly half of all Sun-like stars in the galaxy host a rocky planet within the conservative habitable zone, implying on the order of 300 million potentially habitable worlds in the Milky Way alone. Attempts to lower the figure by tightening the definition of habitable barely moved it. Attempts to argue Kepler's field of view was atypical failed against the broader stellar population statistics. Attempts to argue that rocky planets in the habitable zone don't imply habitability are technically correct but statistically defeated. You do not need every planet to be habitable. You only need a tiny fraction of 300 million. The math has been reworked by independent groups. The number holds. This is not the same mathematics that produced entry 10. It is a separate methodology, a separate instrument, a separate team. 2 independent roads arrived at the same answer, and the answer is that the ground is there, 300 million times, in the sky above your city tonight. If the ground exists on 300 million worlds, and the equation predicts thousands of civilizations, where exactly is the arithmetic going wrong? Or is it going wrong at all? Ground is one thing. Chemistry that only life is known to produce is another. Number 8. The K218b Biosignature Candidate. Niku Madhusudhan's team at the University of Cambridge were not looking for aliens. They were characterizing the atmosphere of a specific class of exoplanet, Hycean worlds, hydrogen atmosphere planets potentially covered in ocean. Their target was K218b, a planet 124 light-years away in the constellation Leo, orbiting a small red dwarf star. Standard atmospheric spectroscopy on such planets, using the James Webb Space Telescope, expected to reveal methane, carbon dioxide, and water vapor, the ordinary chemistry of a warm hydrogen envelope. Anything more exotic would demand extraordinary evidence and immediate independent confirmation before being taken seriously by the field. The spectrum returned methane, it returned carbon dioxide, and it returned a tentative signal for dimethyl sulfide, a molecule that on Earth is produced almost exclusively by marine microorganisms. The paper, Carbon-Bearing Molecules in a Possible Hycean Atmosphere, appeared in the Astrophysical Journal Letters in 2023. The dimethyl sulfide detection sat at low statistical confidence, well below the threshold physicists use for discovery, and the authors themselves said plainly that follow-up JWST observations were required before any biological claim could be made. Every abiotic explanation on the table has weaknesses. Photochemical production of dimethyl sulfide without life has never been demonstrated at atmospheric concentrations this high. Instrument systematics were the leading alternative, but follow-up JWST time is examining exactly that. Contamination from the host star has been considered and does not fit the spectrum cleanly. The molecule may not even be there at the concentrations reported. The critical fact is honest. Nobody knows yet, and the paper does not claim otherwise. You are alive during the first period in human history when the question, is there life on that specific world, is not philosophy. It is telescope time. It is a queue at a review board. It is an answer that may arrive in a data release, on a Tuesday, without warning. If the follow-up spectrum returns with the signal reinforced, what is the correct emotional response to learning we were never the only chemistry that ever mattered? Chemistry is passive. A radio signal is a choice. Number 7. Breakthrough Listen Candidate 1. The Parkes Radio Telescope in New South Wales is a workhorse. In April and May of 2019, it was pointed at Proxima Centauri, the closest star to our own, as part of a wider Breakthrough Listen survey coordinated by researchers at the University of California, Berkeley. The scan was routine. The observers were not expecting a candidate. Standard SETI practice defines a technosignature as narrowband, much narrower than any natural astrophysical process is known to produce, and Doppler shifting in a way consistent with a moving planetary source. Almost every candidate flagged over 60 years of SETI has failed at least one of these criteria within days of analysis. One signal, catalogued as BLC1, met the criteria on first inspection. It was narrowband at roughly 982 MHz. It drifted in frequency in a way loosely consistent with a source on a rotating planet, and it came from the exact direction of Proxima Centauri. The formal analysis, led by Sophia Sheikh and colleagues, appeared in Nature Astronomy in 2021, alongside a companion paper examining the candidate's properties in detail. The team spent over a year working the data before publishing anything, and they concluded that the signal was almost certainly human radio frequency interference produced by electronics on the ground. The interference hypothesis was tested exhaustively. Every attempt to make the signal genuinely extraterrestrial failed on specific technical grounds. The drift rate did not match Proxima B's orbital motion cleanly, and dozens of similar signals appeared in later observations when Proxima was not the target. That is not a defeat. That is the scientific method working exactly as designed, on an infrastructure sensitive enough to catch a candidate in the first place, and rigorous enough to kill it responsibly. You live inside the first generation with instruments capable of detecting a message from the nearest star. The pipeline exists. The staff exists. The false positives are already being triaged in real time. The next candidate may not fail. When the next signal comes through the same pipeline and survives every test, will we be culturally prepared for the sentence that follows? Radio is one wavelength. Waste heat is another. Number 6. The Dyson-sphere search. In the early 2010s, Jason Wright at Pennsylvania State University asked an unfashionable question. If a civilization at Kardashev Type 2 or Type 3 existed anywhere in the observable universe, It would necessarily radiate enormous quantities of waste heat in the mid-infrared. So he built a survey to look for exactly that signature at galactic scale. The standard assumption in the SETI community had been that Dyson-sphere searches were technologically premature, but NASA's Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, launched in 2009, had already mapped the entire sky in the mid-infrared at unprecedented resolution. The data was sitting in an archive. Nobody had asked it the specific question yet. The JWST team, Roger Griffith, Jason Wright, Jessica Maldonado, Matthew Povich, Steen Sigurdsson, and Brendan Mullen, filtered roughly 100,000 galaxies from WISE data for anomalous mid-infrared brightness, inconsistent with ordinary stellar populations and dust. Their paper, titled The G-Infrared Search for Extraterrestrial Civilizations with Large Energy Supplies, 3, was published in the Astrophysical Journal Supplement series in 2015. It identified a small number of galaxies with unusual mid-infrared emission worth follow-up. None was later confirmed as a Type 3 Kardashev civilization. The most anomalous candidates were consistent with natural, if unusual, astrophysics. Every candidate that survived initial cuts had a plausible natural explanation: dust-obscured star formation, active galactic nuclei, or peculiar geometry. The absence of confirmed detections has been read three ways. It has been read as proof that Type 3 civilizations do not exist. It has been read as proof that they exist, but do not radiate in the mid-infrared band. And it has been read as proof that the survey was not sensitive enough. All three readings remain live in the current literature. Somebody, for the first time in human history, actually looked. The tool exists. The methodology is peer-reviewed. Any species advanced enough to eat a star for breakfast would have been noticed, unless the assumption that they would want to eat a star is itself wrong. What if the reason no Kardashev Type 3 civilization has been found is that no civilization ever grows in the direction we assumed intelligence would grow? Whole galaxies came up empty. A single star did not. Number 5. Boyajian star. Tabitha Boyajian, then at Yale University, was helping to run Planet Hunters, a citizen science project that let volunteers scan Kepler light curves for dips that automated software might have missed. In 2015, a group of these volunteers flagged a single star, cataloged as KIC 8462852, as doing something the pipeline could not classify. A planet transiting its host star should produce a dip of roughly 1%, lasting hours, on a strict periodic schedule. Standard stellar variability produces smooth, predictable behavior. Nothing in the standard catalog of stellar phenomena predicts what the volunteers had just noticed. KIC 8462852 was dimming irregularly, aperiodically, and by up to 22%, an order of magnitude deeper than any planet transit, and unlike any known form of stellar variability. Some dips lasted days, some lasted weeks, none of them repeated on any recognizable schedule. The discovery paper, Planet Hunters 9, KIC 8462852, Where's the Flux?, was accepted to monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society in 2016. Follow-up work led by Jason Wright openly considered a swarm of alien megastructures as a hypothesis worth taking seriously in the absence of any natural mechanism that fit the data. Comets in an evaporating disk were proposed and failed to explain the depth of the dips. A recent interstellar collision was proposed and failed to leave the expected debris signature. Intrinsic stellar variability was proposed and had no known physical mechanism to account for it. The megastructure hypothesis was proposed and, to the credit of the researchers involved, was pursued honestly. A 2018 follow-up paper by Boyajian and colleagues in the Astrophysical Journal Letters found the dimming was wavelength-dependent, consistent with fine dust, not solid structures. The mystery has a mundane resolution now, but the sequence matters. For roughly 3 years, serious astronomers publicly considered alien engineering as a live hypothesis in peer-reviewed journals. That taboo broke inside your lifetime. What breaks next may not have a dust explanation waiting for it. The next Boyajian star will come. Will its natural explanation arrive as cleanly this time, or will it linger? Some paradoxes are observational, others live inside the mathematics itself. Number 4. The Hard Steps Model. Brandon Carter, the physicist who first formulated the anthropic principle, was not trying to explain extraterrestrial silence in 1983. He was thinking about the coincidence that Earth's biosphere took almost the full lifetime of the Sun to produce technological intelligence, and wondering what that timing was quietly telling us. The standard reading of Earth's evolutionary history had been that life took a long time because complexity is slow. Carter suggested a colder reading. If certain evolutionary transitions were extraordinarily improbable, so improbable that only a rare planetary lifetime could contain them, then the timing was not slowness. It was luck, drawn from a distribution overwhelmingly full of failures. The mathematics, extended by Andrew Watson at the University of East Anglia in a 2008 paper in the journal Astrobiology, implied that the number of hard steps between simple life and intelligence could be 4 or 5, each with probability so low that most biospheres never cross them at all. Watson's model, Implications of an Anthropic Model of Evolution for Emergence of Complex Life and Intelligence, calculated that even on a planet where simple life takes hold immediately, the expected time to intelligence exceeds the habitable lifetime of most stars, meaning most planets that begin the process are extinguished by stellar evolution long before they ever finish it. Objections have not aged well. The idea that hard steps could be worked around by faster evolution collides with the fossil record's long silences. The idea that Earth's timing is a fluke has been formalized. It is a fluke, that is the point. The idea that the hard steps model is untestable has been partly answered by comparative planetology and by direct constraints on the origin of eukaryotic cells. Recent 2024 work by Snyder-Beatty and colleagues has revisited the framework with sharper statistics, and the underlying tension survives scrutiny. You may be part of a species that crossed 4 coin flips no other lineage on this planet ever won. Your ancestors are not merely successful. In the mathematical sense, they are absurd, the improbable output of an experiment that mostly produces empty worlds. If the hard steps model is correct, what exactly did the ancestors of your first eukaryotic cell do that trillions of other cellular lineages could not? Rarity is one filter. Colonization math is another. Number 3. The self-replicating probe argument. Frank Tipler, then at Tulane University, was not writing about aliens as science fiction. He was formalizing a mathematical argument from John von Neumann's earlier work on self-replicating machines and applying it to the question of interstellar colonization. His starting point was engineering, not astronomy. The standard assumption in SETI had been that interstellar travel was so slow that the galaxy's silence was unsurprising, even at high fractions of the speed of light. Crossing the Milky Way would take tens of thousands of years. That framing quietly assumed one civilization traveling once. Tipler pointed out that a single civilization capable of building one self-replicating probe would, through geometric replication at each destination star, colonize the entire Milky Way in something on the order of a few million years, a fraction of 1% of the galaxy's age. Tipler's paper, Extraterrestrial Intelligent Beings Do Not Exist, was published in the Quarterly Journal of the Royal Astronomical Society in 1980. Using conservative probe velocities and reasonable replication times, his estimate landed between roughly 300,000 and a few million years for full galactic saturation. Objections have piled up and none has killed the argument. Probes are impossible, fails because we can already sketch designs on paper. Civilizations would refuse to build them, fails because it requires unanimity across every civilization that ever existed, forever. Probes are here but hidden, the zoo hypothesis, is unfalsifiable and therefore not a rebuttal, only a possibility. Civilizations self-destruct before they build them is plausible, but assumes every one of them dies, without exception, in a specific narrow window. If entries 10 and 9 are anywhere close to correct, the galaxy should already look colonized. Your solar system should be a suburb. The absence of visible engineering across the sky is not comfort. It is a data point that demands an explanation, and none of the current candidates fully provides one. If we are alone, why? And if we are not, where are the probes that should have arrived here long before humans ever existed? The probes have not arrived, but something biological, arguably, already has. Number 2. Directed panspermia. In 1973, Francis Crick, who had co-discovered the structure of DNA, and Leslie Orgel, a chemist working on the origin of life, were not attempting a science fiction thought experiment. They were struggling with a specific technical problem. Molybdenum's role in enzymes seemed unreasonably central for a metal so rare in Earth's crust. The standard view of life's origin held, and still largely holds, that biochemistry arose from local conditions on the early Earth. Every model of the emergence of life assumed the raw materials, catalysts, and environments were all indigenous. The trace elements of biology should reflect Earth's crust, not something else. Crick and Orgel proposed, in a peer-reviewed journal, that life on Earth might have been deliberately seeded, sent by an earlier civilization in microbial form aboard an unmanned spacecraft, and that the anomalous chemistry of biology could be a fingerprint of the sender's environment, not of ours. Their paper, titled simply Directed Panspermia, appeared in the journal Icarus in 1973, at a time when the journal was edited by Carl Sagan. It remains one of the most cited unusual papers in astrobiology, and the framework has been revisited in the modern literature as an ongoing, if minority, hypothesis worth formal treatment. The specific molybdenum argument has weakened as biochemistry has matured, but the broader hypothesis has not been closed. Objections that directed panspermia just moves the problem are correct but not fatal. Moving the origin of life elsewhere is itself a legitimate scientific hypothesis. Objections that no evidence of engineered biology has ever been found in the terrestrial genome are true, but nobody has yet cataloged the genome exhaustively for the kind of signature that would be expected. There is no experiment that has ruled it out. You may be reading this sentence with molecular machinery that was not authored on this planet. Your ancestors, in the deepest possible sense, may have arrived here as cargo. The question of where you come from is older than the ground beneath you. If life on Earth was seeded, deliberately or accidentally, who did it, why did they do it, and are they still watching? The math predicts them. The same math also, honestly, still permits our silence. Number 1. The Fermi Paradox does not fully dissolve. Return to the Oxford paper that opened this list. Sandberg, Drexler, and Ord did not, despite the way their work has often been summarized in popular coverage, prove that the galaxy is full of civilizations. They did something more careful than that. They audited the full probability distribution honestly, and they looked at both tails. The standard modern reading of the Fermi Paradox says the mathematics predicts crowds, and the sky shows silence, and something must have gone wrong. The Sandberg framework was expected to sharpen that contradiction, not soften it. Instead, its output distribution stretched in both directions at once. One tail of the same distribution, the same equation, run the same way, predicted galactic abundance. The other tail predicted a universe in which humanity is, statistically, entirely alone. Both were compatible with the current uncertainty in the biology terms. The 2018 Sandberg, Drexler, and Ord analysis, Dissolving the Fermi Paradox, from the Future of Humanity Institute at the University of Oxford, calculated a meaningful posterior probability, on the order of 1 in 3, that we are the only technological civilization in the observable universe. That number came from the same rigorous methodology that produced the crowded galaxy estimate. Attempts to close the wide tail failed because the underlying parameters really are that uncertain. Attempts to argue we cannot be both predicted common and predicted alone failed because probability distributions are allowed to be wide. Attempts to declare the paradox fully dissolved by the paper itself failed on a careful reading. The author's own conclusion is that our uncertainty is large enough that silence is not, statistically, a paradox at all. It is a live possibility. The same equation that told you the galaxy should be teeming told you, in the next line, that you might belong to the only lineage in the observable universe that ever wondered about it. Both futures live inside the mathematics. Only one of them is real. Which tail of the distribution are you sitting on, the crowded one or the empty one? And how would you ever know? 10 entries, every one drawn from a peer-reviewed paper, every one produced by researchers who were not chasing the disturbing result. They were doing routine work when the result found them. The universe is not confused. The mathematics is not broken. The instruments are working. What is uncertain is us, our place in the equation, our timing, our aloneness or our company. The silence overhead is not empty. It is a sentence we have not yet learned to read. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now.